everyone. Thanks for attending Seeking Environmental Justice for North Birmingham. My name is Odiano Villalgela, and I, along with Rose Albert and Jake Lindahl, are health policy ambassadors in the Lister Hill Center for Health Policy. So we've organized this event in order to give you all an opportunity to learn more about environmental justice issues in Birmingham, in addition to informing you all about ways that you can take action. So this presentation will be led by Nina Morgan, a climate and environmental justice organizer with the Greater Birmingham Alliance to Stop Pollution, or GASP, here in Birmingham, Alabama. Before we begin, this is a polite reminder to list all questions in the chat function or using the chat function. We'll be answering questions like towards the end of the presentation. So yeah, with that being said, let's go ahead and move on to the presentation.
Awesome. Hey, everybody. My name is Nina Morgan. Again, I work for GASP as the Climate and Environmental Justice Organizer, and wake up every day and think about how to address the issues of environmental injustice and environmental racism in the city of Birmingham and really kind of beyond throughout the state of Alabama. So what I'm going to do right now, really quick, is share my screen. So you can all see the presentation. And okay, awesome. Okay, sweet. So let's. Can I get a thumbs? Does it look okay? Okay, I'm gonna take that as a yes. Odie, and I just saw you unmuted yourself. Am I good?
Yes, you're good.
You're all good.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, cool. So, yeah, so environmental justice for North Birmingham. So like I mentioned, I work for the Greater Birmingham Alliance to Stop Pollution, which is a really small nonprofit here locally that works to advance clean air and environmental justice in the Greater Birmingham area. And so we go by GASP for short, and we have there's three full-time staff at GASP, and then 2 part-time staff. So we have Michael Hansen, who's the executive director. We have one staff attorney, Haley Lewis. We have Kirsten Bryant, who's our deputy director of outreach. There's me, and I've been working with GASP for going on like 1.5 years, 2 years now. And I'm the EJ organizer. And then we also just recently hired Keisha Brown, who's our community liaison. And she's a resident of the Harriman Park neighborhood, which is one of the 3 neighborhoods that make up the North Birmingham 35th Avenue site. So I'm just bringing this up because I know, I feel like a lot of people think GASP is much bigger than it actually is. And then there's like always surprise when people find out how small we are. I know when I first started working with GASP and getting to really know and get familiar with the work that GASP does, I was really surprised that such a small organization does such big work. So we also have a very robust board of directors, a lot of people who do other community work in Birmingham, and so on and so forth. A lot of people representing different sectors, and notably a lot of folks coming from UAB that are on our board. So a little bit more about GASP. We have a really big vision, and that's a healthy, just, and sustainable Alabama. And so though kind of our focus area is the Greater Birmingham Metro, our vision encompasses the whole state of Alabama. And so our mission and kind of how we achieve that vision is to advance healthy air and environmental justice in the Greater Birmingham region through education, advocacy, and collaboration. That's how we see we should make change and achieve that big vision that encompasses the state. And GASP has been around for a little over 10 years. In 2019, we 2020, we celebrated our anniversary, and we started as a health advocacy organization called Alabama First, and in 2010 changed our name to the Greater Birmingham Alliance to Stop Pollution, to honor a student-led group here in Birmingham in the 1970s that fought for the enforcement of the Clean Air Act, that fought for, the air, the smoggy Birmingham air, to be clean and breathable. And so that name and the work that they did inspires our name, and it inspires our work to be a voice for everybody's right to breathe clean and healthy air, regardless of race, zip code, you name it. And so some different buckets of our work are, of course, healthy air. We do a lot of air monitoring work, as well, a lot of community science. And we have different information on our website about just what the quality of the air is in Birmingham, which is something that I feel like a lot of people, might miss out on really getting to know more about. We also focus on climate and energy policy. We recognize that in order to achieve that vision of clean air, environmental justice, we have to address the impact of fossil fuel industries. And so we work to advocate for clean and renewable energy, and work to also, address climate change and the impacts of climate change in that work as well. And then, of course, environmental justice is another bucket of our work, making sure, again, that everybody has a right to, breathe clean air and live in a healthy environment, regardless of zip code, and so on and so forth. And then storytelling is another area of our work. So, you go on our website, you go on our social media. One thing that you're going to see is us really amplifying people's stories, especially folks who live in Birmingham, about the importance of clean air, about the fight on the ground in North Birmingham and other areas in terms of environmental injustices that are happening and what people are having to deal with. And you can catch a lot of videos and stuff, Fresh Voices for Clean Air. It's the website, I believe, that kind of, just highlights different community leaders and members that talk about why the work is so important and how it really impacts them. Who am I to kind of talk to you all about environmental justice, and kind of where does my personal story intersect with this work? I'm a UAB graduate. I graduated in 2018 with degrees in anthropology and sociology. And while I was at UAB, I did a lot of different things. I was an intern with UAB Sustainability. That was when Dr. Julie Price was the sustainability manager at the time. Also, I worked with Bambi Ingram, who I believe now is the sustainability manager at UAB. I don't know if you all have seen the Solar House on the corner, I believe on 11th Avenue, across from the tennis courts, but I was a part of the original Solar Decathlon team that built that house and participated in the Department of Energy's Solar Decathlon international competition to build a solar home. I also mapped every single tree on UAB's campus. It was, I think, like 3,000 trees. I just used the iPad, got trained up, and learned tree identification to build UAB's sustainability asset map. And if you go on the sustainability website, you'll see like the sustainability map highlighting all of the sustainability assets and features on UAB's campus. I also have worked as an intern with the Nature Conservancy. I've worked at the city of Birmingham. And I started kind of getting experience and building relationships with GASP before I even got hired as a member of their junior board. I started as a volunteer and then eventually got on their junior board, and we did a lot of canvassing, fundraising, planning events, and all of that stuff. And when I got the opportunity, I applied for the position as an environmental and climate justice organizer. And that's kind of what led me to where I am today. But I always like to mention that I myself am from a community impacted by environmental injustice, environmental racism. I'm from Sipsey, Alabama, which is in Walker County, also known as Coal County. There's a lot of coal mine camps, which have turned into communities over time. And also the Alabama Mining Museum is in Walker County. And so I'm right down the street, about 45 minutes from Birmingham. And it's a small town called Sipsey, Alabama. It's where I spent most of my time as a kid and teenager. And Sipsey is bordered by a coal mine, a surface mine called the McWayne Burton Bend mine. And so I have vivid memories, especially when I was like 8, 9, 10, hearing the sirens to let people know that a blast was going to happen, feeling my grandmother's house shake as they, exploded, blew up the earth to get that coal, and very much was aware when the Tyson rendering chicken plant spill happened, I believe back in 2018, I think the spring of 2018, when there was a fish die-off, hundreds of thousands of fish were killed as well, in addition to, all of the impacts from the coal mine. So my work with GASP and my work in North Birmingham is reflective of my background as someone who is from a community that's to this day is impacted by environmental degradation, contamination, destruction. And on my dad's side of the family, my dad's side of the family is from Collegeville, which is a neighborhood in North Birmingham that makes up the 35th Avenue Superfund site. So this stuff runs deep for me. It's very personal, and I carry that with me in doing the work at GASP. A little bit about environmental justice. I'm sure most people on this call knows what environmental justice is, but just to kind of give a brief overview and summary so we can get our definitions right. If you read the EPA's definition of environmental justice, which I'm not going to do right now, just for the sake of time, but if you read it, and I'll send my slides out so everybody can have access to these links and stuff, there's a particular focus on equality and fairness as it concerns to decision-making and laws, right? So when you read the EPA's definition, what you're not going to see is a statement like everybody has the right to breathe clean and healthy air and live in clean and healthy environments regardless of zip code. That's not going to be in the EPA's definition per se. It's more focused on the application of laws and people being included into the decision-making process. Maybe they've updated their definition since the last time I've read it. I don't think they have, though. But it's important to point that out and contrast that with the environmental justice movement definition of environmental justice, or EJ, as you might hear it called. The environmental justice movement is a direct response to the impacts of extraction, the impacts of the fossil fuel industries, the extractive economy, and the environmental justice's vision and definition of environmental justice is focused on abolition. That is to say that the EJ movement is focused on abolishing environmental harms, period, which is reflective of our value and vision and principles at GASP, which is that everybody should have a right to breathe clean and healthy air and live in a clean and healthy environment, regardless of zip code, period. End of conversation. There should be no environmental harms that destroy people and our planet. And so it's good to kind of contrast that. Understanding environmental justice is to understand our history, is to understand that communities across this country and around the world are communities that are most vulnerable, Black and Brown communities, poor communities, are dealing with the direct impacts and harms of extraction of fossil fuels, and it's unjust. And so, yeah, I just wanted to kind of point that out. And you know, there's people who have been doing this work for decades. The pictures that you see are pictures of people who are deemed the mother of environmental justice, Hazel M. Johnson, who fought in the early 20th century in Southeast Chicago for pollution to end in her community. And also Dr. Robert Bullard, which more people hear about versus Miss Hazel. More people talk about Dr. Bullard as the father of environmental justice. He's written extensively and fought in his community against environmental racism, and has actually been to UAB, as a matter of fact, to present on the work that he's done, the books that he's written, like Dumping in Dixie, and other books that highlights, you know, the plight of communities all across the country and around the world in terms of dealing with environmental racism and environmental injustice. And so I want to lift Hazel Johnson and Robert Bullard up in these conversations. There's people who have thought about this work and have been doing the work for a long time. And that's also mirrored in the principles of environmental justice. There's a really great website if y'all want to look more into some of this stuff. It's called www.ej.net.org, that really catalogs all the work, all EJ related work that's been done from so many different people. And so, yeah, it's good stuff to look into as people who want to study the environmental justice movement and environmental justice scholars and activists and so on. So getting to North Birmingham, what you're looking at right now is a redlining map. Birmingham, like so many other cities across the country, was a victim, for lack of better words, of redlining, which is racism codified in law, where communities were basically color coded, you know, undesirable communities, high industrialized communities, Black and brown communities, you know, color coded and highlighted on maps to prevent financing, and to basically force people to live in different areas based on their race, different areas in Birmingham. And so we are a red line city. Birmingham is a red line city. I encourage everybody to go downtown to the library and look at the redlining map. It was there was a really cool gallery at the Birmingham Museum of Art on redlining. I don't think it's there anymore, but you can look online for, like, you know, just documentation of that, and definitely just go to the library and try to look at the redlining map yourself. I highly encourage it. And North Birmingham is a textbook case of environmental racism, which basically environmental racism is when you know, environmental harms are externalized and placed on people of you know, black people, brown people, you know, communities of color, getting dealt with the most extreme environmental harms and hazards. So the area at the top, kind of right, is so you have Inglenook. I don't know how many people are familiar with the Birmingham neighborhood Inglenook. I don't know if y'all can see my mouse, but Inglenook is here. Okay. And all of this red is heavy industry, land that's heavily industrialized land. A little bit north of Inglenook, you have Tarrant right here. And then you have neighborhoods in North Birmingham that are circled here in red. In particular, you see this light brown color that's kind of boxed in with all this heavy industry. That's That's parts of Collegeville, the Harriman Park neighborhood in particular, also known as L&N City, named after the railroad that goes through the community, surrounded by industry, right? So we're dealing with this legacy of environmental racism to this day. We're still dealing with the fact that you had areas that people of color and poor people were forced to live in based on policy, based on law, and are still dealing with the consequences in 2021. So I also want to speak to the very rich and deep civil rights history and movement history of North Birmingham. We cannot talk about the environmental issues and the racism and not talk about the civil rights movement. I think it's very disrespectful to do anything but. And you had a lot of movement. I remember being like 10 and my mom and dad were separated, but he would get me and my brother every other weekend, and he would talk for hours in the car if we were like traveling somewhere about my grandmother ironing the shirts of preachers who were, doing demonstrations and participating in the civil rights movement. People, hosting folks like Dr. Martin Luther King, Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth, and so on and so forth. And a lot of that history lies in the neighborhoods that make up the North Birmingham community. I mean, we have Bethel Baptist Church, where Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth preached. A lot of foot soldiers still living in North Birmingham to this day, whose soil is contaminated, whose air is contaminated, but fought for our rights. And so I want to uplift that. I think it's pretty sad that when they built the bridge in Collegeville, that kind of cuts through, it's adjacent to Macklin Park, and it also is adjacent to Collegeville homes, government housing. There's like this lonesome plaque that nobody can see that says Collegeville, and it says that I believe the birthplace of the civil rights movement on a plaque near a storm drain that nobody can see. And I think that it's our charge to reckon with that history and to reckon with the fact that we don't talk about it enough. And what does it mean for a community like North Birmingham, for neighborhoods like Collegeville to have, given so much to the movement for liberation and freedom, and still are dealing with like racism and injustice to this day. I think that's something that we need to grapple with. I think it's definitely something that our leaders in the city and in the state have to grapple with, because everybody likes talking about the civil rights movement. Everybody likes talking about, the history of Birmingham and the resistance, but we don't like to talk about what current people who were actually there and demonstrating are dealing with right now in the city, right down the street from downtown. So just want to point that out. I'm trying to hurry because I know that we are limited on time. And I just want to say the legacy of resistance still continues with community leaders like Charlie Powell of Panic, with GASP, and everybody who, comes out to our events and participates to amplify and really uplift the fight that's happening on the ground today pertaining to addressing environmental injustice in North Birmingham. A little bit about the North Birmingham Superfund site. So a lot of investigations started happening in 2011, between now and 2011. Some different things that you should know about the Superfund site is that elevated levels of air toxics and soot kind of plagued the community. The EPA started doing some testing and found different contaminants in the soil, like arsenic, lead, PAHs, this, that, and the third, things that are unhealthy for people to have in things that are unhealthy to be in the soil, especially in areas, of that are residential. And, even though that was found, there hasn't been like a comprehensive health assessment, despite residents who have been living there for years saying that, like they have cancer and a lot of negative health issues because of the pollution in the community. Walter Coke, which is now Bluestone Coke, and that's owned by, it used to be owned by Walter Coke and Drummond Company. And now it's owned by Jim Justice of Justice Energy out of West Virginia. And West Virginians face a lot of the same environmental injustices as people in North Birmingham. But Bluestone Coke and Nucor Steel are major sources of air pollution. And there's also kind of a lot of minor sources of air pollution. There's a lot of metal recycling facilities, especially in Collegeville, that also pollute the air in the community. And a long-term cleanup and remediation of the North Birmingham 35th Avenue Superfund site was thwarted because of corruption and because of illegal and legal, but unethical efforts that occurred to try to keep the community from being off of the EPA's national priorities list, which is basically what it is. It's like a list of the most contaminated communities in the country that the EPA prioritizes for cleanup, for deeper investigations, for the cause of pollution, and for remediation, and sometimes, though rare, relocation. So that's a little bit of just about the different characteristics of the North Birmingham Superfund site. I didn't mention it as a major source of air pollution, but it's worth noting that ABC Coke, which is kind of illustrated here in this picture, is also a major source of air pollution. And ABC Coke is located in Tarrant. So I'm not going to read this whole thing, but I'm just, first of all, the work that GASP has been doing spans over a decade. GASP started the advocacy in North Birmingham first and foremost by just listening, just coming to community meetings in the area about pollution, and just sitting and really listening to the complaints and concerns of people living in the area. And I believe Lois Gibbs, who people call the mother of Superfund, came to North Birmingham, I believe in 2011, to talk with the community about the work that she did in Love Canal and her community to kind of resist polluters, and her charge at the end of the presentation was that somebody in North Birmingham had to organize the community to resist the pollution, to try to get justice. And Mr. Charlie Powell, at the time, who was he was there attending the meeting, and he lived in the community, he grew up there, kind of stood up, and he was the volunteer. He was the one who kind of said, I'll do it, I'll get the community together to resist. And so Panic People Against Neighborhood Industrial Contamination, which was the name that Mr. Powell's wife, it was her idea to call it that, was formed in 2012, and GASP and Panic has been fighting to get justice ever since. And so yeah, GASP has submitted a lot of public comments on the ambient air plan that the health department has to have and has to kind of update every year. GASP also has submitted comments on Bluestone Coke, as it's now called, their ABC Coke's Title V permits, which they have to have in order to operate, and which are kind of renewed by the health department as the agency that has the responsibility to enforce the Clean Air Act in Jefferson County. 2014 was a really big year because that's when GASP also premiered Toxic City. And in 2014, that's when the EPA originally proposed adding the 35th Avenue site to the national priorities list, and so on and so forth. And so something worth mentioning is that indictments were issued for Balch and Bingham and Drummond Company executives for being a part of a corruption scandal, for being part of a plot to keep the North Birmingham community from being added to the national priorities list. I'll get into that in a little bit more detail. And during the federal trial, when all of this kind of came to a head, it was found that GASP was mentioned over 400 times in billing documents. So there was a lot of, opposition to the work that both GASP and Panic were trying to do to get justice for the 35th Avenue site and try to get that NPL listing. And so we've continued to do the work, even in the midst of COVID-19. We've continued to do the work as people like Rose and Odion and others, Jacob, so y'all know, we've just been still doing the work in trying to advocate and organize despite, being in a global pandemic. So I want to talk just a little bit about the corruption scandal within this context of environmental justice for North Birmingham, right? There was an orchestrated attempt to keep the community from being added to the national priorities list. And ultimately they won because the 35th Avenue site hasn't been added to the national priorities list. I mean, people are still fighting for that wrong to be righted. And it all was because Drummond Company, which was named as a responsible party by the EPA, didn't want to pay for any deeper cleanup, any actions. I mean, even now, they aren't taking responsibility. The EPA is having to use taxpayer money to engage in their emergency cleanup that we see happening in North Birmingham right now, where the soil is being scraped up and there's new topsoil that's being and so on and so forth. But yeah, Drummond, Balch and Bingham, and then State Representative Oliver Robinson all worked together to sabotage the national priorities listing. So starting with Representative Oliver Robinson, again, 2014, EPA proposes the community to be added to the national priorities list. GASP and Panic and residents were trying to fight for that. And then, as you know, when Drummond Company was named a potentially responsible party, for the contamination and the pollution, and would have been on the hook for paying millions of dollars, they, instead of being a good neighbor, instead of taking responsibility, they did the exact opposite and worked, together with their attorney and an elected representative to create this scheme to get the community from being added to the national priorities list and to stop the EPA. They created a sham nonprofit called Alabama, or the Alliance for Jobs and the Economy, which kind of was this means to funnel money in from Drummond Company to pay people, to pay Oliver Robinson, to spread misinformation about the EPA, to sow seeds of division in the community, and to oppose the NPL listing, saying that it would have been a bad thing, and this, that, and the third. So yeah, I won't get into the nitty gritty just for time's sake, but that's really what it was all about. And in Tarrant, like I mentioned, ABC Caucus and Tarrant, people in Tarrant have similar pollution issues to people in North Birmingham. And there was a misinformation campaign organized called Get Smart Tarrant, to basically try to convince people that getting their soil tested was a bad thing, not to trust the EPA when they come knocking on your door asking you if you'd like to get your soil tested to see, if there's any contaminants or what have you in there. Don't trust them, don't believe them. It's bad for the community. And so that was just more sowing seeds to division. And because of that, the EPA tested a few properties in Tarrant, but ultimately they didn't deem it worthy of deeper investigation in the same ways that happened in North Birmingham, which is why you see the emergency removal process happening. People in Tarrant didn't even get that because of the misinformation campaign. And so that's kind of that's work, and that's something to be reckoned with today. So a little bit about the masterminds of the scheme. Just to highlight a few people, you had David Roberson, who was the VP, Drummond executive, working with Joel Gilbert, their attorney at Balch & Bingham, to keep the community from being on the national priorities list. Joel Gilbert in particular, wrote a lot of ghost letters to almost every level of the Alabama government. He lobbied, he helped create the sham nonprofits that I previously mentioned, to make sure that Representative Oliver Robinson was paid. Just performed a lot of legal work with the goal of keeping the community from being added to the national priorities list. You also had Trey Glenn and Scott Phillips. Scott Phillips worked at this consulting firm that is part of Strata Professional Services, and they kind of provided, and they both were like partners in this business, but they provided technical expertise and consulting to refute, to help Drummond Company refute their liability as being a potentially responsible party. They helped create a lot of confusion, helped orchestrate the misinformation campaign. And Trey Glenn in particular, who eventually became EPA Region 4 Administrator, was kind of instrumental in getting the director of the Alabama Department of Environmental Management, who is the authority that enforces the Clean Air Act for the rest of the state of Alabama, to reverse their original position to support the community being on the NPL. So you have Drummond, you have ADEM, you have an elected representative, you have a highly regarded law firm, all working together to keep this community, this marginalized community, from getting the minimal justice that they deserve. So yeah, and Drummond, they were protecting their bottom line at the end of the day. And there's just different versions, 3 different versions of anti-NPL letters that were written and drafted and circulated in the community, submitted to the EPA, extensive ghostwriting for elected officials at every level of Alabama government, anti-NPL resolutions passed, anti-NPL message at ADEM, which led to the ADEM's reversal of supporting the national priorities list. And these are just pictures, right, of the communications during this time. Outreach activities, that talk about Get Smart Tarrant, working with the local NAACP. That's right. Holding meetings, to oppose people getting their soil tested, and people not trusting the EPA. And members of Alabama Alliance for Jobs and the Economy, this sham nonprofit, were companies like Alabama Power, Thompson Tractor, Drummond Company, ASIPCO, American Cast Iron and Pipe. All these powerful companies working to keep a small community like North Birmingham from getting some help. And then just more information about Get Smart Tarrant, these are actually pictures of flyers that were distributed in Tarrant to try to keep people from getting their soil tested and keep Tarrant from being listed as a Superfund site, and maybe even Tarrant itself being added to the national priorities list. Like I said, you know, the legal activities that happen, definitely conspiring to bribe an elected official. That's illegal. Wiring fraud through sham nonprofits, that's illegal. And then, you know, legal but unethical activities, you know, creating a misinformation campaign under the guise of community outreach, ghostwriting elected officials and forcing positions, infiltrating community groups, sowing seeds of division, cozying up to regulators, doing things to get them to change their position, you know, that large contributions to political candidates, that kind of thing, all unethical. And then these are pictures of folks to put some faces to the names. You have David Roberson, the Drummond executive, who actually down the line sued Drummond and Balchin Bingham because he felt like he was taking the fall for the things that they were doing. Interestingly enough, Joel Gilbert, attorney at Balchin Bingham. To the left here, you have Scott Phillips, I believe, and Trey Glenn. So these are all faces of the people who did that evil stuff. Yeah, and so as of today, Oliver Robinson's the only person who's like did his time in prison. He's now out of prison. No one's gotten an apology. The community has not gotten an apology. No one's really owned up to what they did in a meaningful way. Joel Gilbert, he no longer works at Balchin Bingham. He's appealing conviction. David Robinson was fired from Drummond a year later. And ultimately, the site still hasn't been listed on the MPL. Yeah, and so after all of that corruption, and then you know that happened, and the misinformation campaign came to light. Charlie Powell, who had kind of taken a break from Panic, started organizing again. Since this time, he's been to DC more than twice. He's been to DC a number of times to meet with the EPA and advocate to get the community listed to the national priorities list. He's friends with Lois Gibbs. They communicate regularly. They call each other and check on each other. And she's also worked tirelessly to advocate and try to help, you know, get justice for the 35th Avenue site. GASP has continued to do work. We've encouraged community leaders, Mayor Randall Whitfin, the City Council, Governor Kay Ivey, you know, Doug Jones, who was a senator at the time, and ADEM to support listing the community to the national priorities list. You know, Mayor Whitfin has asked Governor Ivey to support listing the site on the MPL. And we hope that the city does the right thing. Our conversations with the city of Birmingham in particular are ongoing in terms of how they can work with us to mitigate and address environmental injustices happening in North Birmingham and all across the city. And also, you know, we routinely reach out to the governor's office, although we you know, haven't gotten a response as of late in terms of what they can do to help the community. GASP has worked to sustain media attention and really keep this issue alive and in the public consciousness. And, you know, what was once Birmingham's dirty secret is now a story that people all across this country know about. So, you know, like I said, this has been a decade, you know, over a decade, you know, long fight, and change happened slowly, but if nobody, you know, acted, nothing would happen at all. So you have to have hope, and you have to keep doing the work. And you know, just to point out, there is a connection to climate change here. Again, extractive fossil fuel-based industries contribute to climate change. and you know, cause climate change and externalize some of the most extreme hazards to some of the most marginalized and vulnerable communities. So if our mission is to truly be met for Alabama, for Alabama to be healthy, just, sustainable, so on and so forth, then our mission must encompass addressing the climate crisis, you know, by advocating for healthy energy and so on and so forth. I'm going to skip these slides about how GASP is taking action. I've talked about that a little bit. Glad to talk about it more if folks have questions. Yeah, and like first and foremost, how you can help become a member of GASP. You can join for as little as $5. And membership is free for especially for people who live in impacted communities. You can help us tell our story. You can follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We're on there. Reshare, repost our content, especially as it pertains to injustices happening in North Birmingham. You can volunteer. We got Odian Bros, Jake, they all throw down with us and they're helping us, you know, push some demands, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Yeah, and you can volunteer. Something that we're doing this Saturday, we're going to have an environmental justice rally in North Birmingham. We're going to have some food distribution. We're working with some local organizations on this. Different speakers will be there. And so, so yeah, like you can come plug into our work and see things for yourself this Saturday at the North Birmingham Park and Rec Center at 10 a.m. if that's what you want to do, if you're interested. So yeah, I guess I'll end the presentation there. I recognize I went over time a little bit. I apologize. But you know, thank you, Rose. Thank you, Odian, Jake, Sean, everybody for having me join and talk a little bit about environmental justice in Birmingham and in North Birmingham. And yeah, I guess we can open it up for Q&A and for a deeper discussion.
Sure. Thank you so much, Nina. This is an amazing presentation. I think before we open it up for Q&A, let's talk about what we've done as student health policy ambassadors for the Lister Hill Center for Public Health. We, myself, Rose, and Odian are student health ambassadors. And we've been drafting a policy brief that we plan to propose to the mayor. And it calls for the establishment of an equity and environmental justice committee for the city of Birmingham. So we drew from other city and state initiatives to craft the brief. And the following are three of our case studies. So in 2015, Seattle's mayor launched the Equity and Environmental Initiative. And it eventually created the Equity and Environmental Committee. And it was charged with advising policymakers towards the implementation of the equity and environment agenda, which had been pushed by local organizations, much like GASP in Seattle for a long time. This established a blueprint and a guideline for city-level decision-making, such as the creation of a racial equity toolkits. And in 2018, it allocated almost $350,000 to 9 community-led projects. Our next case study in 2018 was Prince George's County Environmental Justice Commission, and that was passed by the Maryland House of Representatives in 2018. This body studies environmental justice issues in Prince George's County, and it also uses geographic identification technology to identify environmental justice hotspots that are used in informing permitting, enforcement, and regulatory activities. They also make policy recommendations, but this to the county health delegation for the Maryland House of Representatives. And then our third was the Oregon Environmental Justice Task Force. which was established in 2007. It also established guidelines, but this for the state's natural resources agencies, and it advises the governor on environmental justice issues. Similarly to the Prince George's County Environmental Justice Commission, the task force identifies low-income and communities of color that are hardest hit by the environmental injustice. So there are similarities with each of these case studies. They each define environmental justice for their jurisdiction. They each advise policymakers and policy enforcers, and their agendas are meaningfully implemented into government programs and policies. So for the city of Birmingham, in our policy brief, we are recommending an equity and environmental justice committee that would advise the mayor and council on decision-making to promote equity and justice goals. It would provide opportunity for meaningful involvement of affected constituents through a public forum for residents to express issues. It would set agendas for social justice and sustainability initiatives. It would analyze the effectiveness of current programs addressing environmental justice. It would propose legislation and policy recommendations to promote environmental justice, as well as conducting annual community needs assessments and partnering with community groups with shared goals to develop a Birmingham level equity, environment, and sustainability plan. And I believe, Rose, you had some things to share as well.
Yes, so one of the main focuses for this also is making sure there is meaningful involvement in the commission itself. So while we have seen these actions in other case studies, we also drew on the demands of the residents who are currently there, and they also wanted this pathway to meaningful involvement and the representation at this level. So we are proposing that at least half the committee is composed of community liaisons, so people who are affected constituents and residents of the North Birmingham community, as well as other heads, managers, or representatives of city agencies who are in these decision-making capacities. So the Department of Transportation, the Department of Public Works, the Housing Authority of the Birmingham District, the Department of Planning, Engineering, and Permits, Jefferson County Health Officer, as well as executive officers of nonprofit advocacies. So similar to the outputs of other commissions that have been established, we're recommending that they have progress reports made available to the public every 6 months, and this can be used to guide this agenda setting for sustainability and equity plans. So our ask for you is that you support this policy brief that we're proposing to the city by signing the petition that we are going to put in the chat and sharing it with others who you think might also be interested in learning more about these issues. So if you have any questions or comments about Nina's presentation, we can also take questions for that or any further questions about the policy brief. So feel free to put any questions you might have in the chat. Nina, thank you so much for your presentation and taking the time to speak with us today.
Yes, Nina, thanks so much. Also, while we're waiting on questions, I'll just go ahead and give you guys a quick update. So if you remember from the introductions, Rose, Jake, and I are health policy ambassadors at the Lister Hill Center. We'll be wrapping up our time with the Lister Hill Center soon. Oh wait, can you guys hear me? Yes, okay, awesome. We'll be wrapping up our time with the Lister Hill Center soon, which means that applications for new health policy ambassadors will be going out this week on Thursday. And so if you're interested in doing that, please pay extra attention to our social media accounts. And if you have questions, you can email lhc@uab.edu. I'll put this information in the chat as well. But yeah, just you can list your questions in the chat if you have any. So it looks like there's one question in the chat asking about reparations. So I guess this is to Nina. So what do you think reparations for environmental justice issues look like?
I mean, I think it looks like anything having to do with abolishing environmental harm. You know, I think it looks like meeting the demands of communities, you know, that of color, Black communities that are, you know, dealing with the legacy of, you know, Jim Crow and chattel slavery, to, you know, to address the things that they're going through. Yeah, I think it looks like policies that speak to that and really um, really holistically address environmental harms and environmental you know, degradation and contamination. Um, so yeah, because it's all about, I mean, when it comes down to it, a lot of the things that you hear GAFS talking about in terms of environmental justice in North Birmingham and other communities in the state that are dealing with similar issues, you know, and other community leaders, I think it comes down to like political will, because the money's there, you know, it's just not going to what it should be going to. So really digging into our budgets locally, statewide, nationally, seeing, you know, what money is going to and where money is not going to, and really rethinking the ways that we you know, get our energy sources from. I think all of that coincides with what it means for reparations to address and repair these environmental harms.
Awesome. Well, it looks like we're approaching 5 o'clock. So after this event, we will send the petition and just action items that we have to your emails, people who signed up for the event. But thanks to all of you for coming. Thank you, Nina, for that awesome presentation. And I hope all of you have a great day.